Welcome to Black Girl Magic Book Chat. I'm Larissa, the African American Resource Center coordinator, and I am excited to bring to you this 5-video series this month. As you may or may not know, March is Women's History Month, and so for this month, I wanted to look into the stories that are written by Black women. So it was actually my supervisors who gave me this idea, but I jumped at the chance because I think that it is so important that we listen to the voices of women, especially African American women, because they have such vibrant and varied stories to tell. So I'm really excited to be able to bring to you my thoughts about these books. Also, it's just another excuse to read for work, so I have an excuse. So I'm excited. Our first book we're going to look at is 7 Days in June. You may or may not be able to see it very well. It is a library book. I downloaded it on the Libby app, and one of the things that I love about the Libby app is that it allows you to read on your Kindle, so that's fascinating. So the first book of our Black Girl Magic Book Chat is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This book came out last year, and it blew up, and I just finally got a chance to read it, so I wanted to share with you all my thoughts. So I'll do a quick summary. So this is a story, so you can see it a little bit better. So you can see both of us. This is a story that features two Black characters who are informed by trauma, but they don't let that stop them from being well-rounded people who are capable of growth and love and care. So to summarize, during the first week of school, an intense alcohol and drug-addled week between two high school seniors living with trauma, Genevieve and Shane fall in love. At the end of this week, Shane seems to disappear, and Genevieve, she has to move past that. So our story kind of picks up 15 years later. Genevieve, now known as Eva Mercy, she's a writer of an erotic witch vampire series. And Shane Hall, he's a writer as well, but he is more of a literary fiction writer, and is a lot more lauded as someone who writes real literature, since Eva writes the kind of more erotic stuff. And so she's divorced with a 13-year-old who is just like probably everything you would want in a 13-year-old, and maybe some things that you don't. But she's living with this invisible disability. And then so Shane is teaching English literature. He's mentoring students who were like him growing up, I guess, in the hood, and kind of dealing with those struggles. And so at a literary panel in New York, they reconnect. And so for the next few days in June, Eva and Shane revisit that week that they had together, discovering a happiness in their new selves. Shane is newly sober. Eva is still kind of grappling with some of those childhood traumas, but is working through them, or at least thinking about working through them. And so they kind of reconnect in this way that neither of them are prepared for, and neither of them are sure that they are ready for, especially coming from backgrounds that are harsh and can be, can push on you, right? To make you think that you're not worthy of love and growth. And so what I love about this book is the relationships. So you have a few different relationships. Eva is kind of our star. And so you've got Eva's relationship with her 13-year-old daughter, which is fascinating because they, in a sense, are best friends, as close as a teenager and their mother could be. They talk to each other. They do things together. They enjoy one another's company, which is a lot different from Eva's relationship with her mom, Lizette, who, and I don't want to spoil it, but Lizette was not the most present mother, kind of always into her own issues, and in some ways probably a little bit jealous of her daughter, to be quite honest. And then Eva also has this collection of Black women writers who are there for her, who uplift her, and who are her sounding boards. And so then you have Shane, who has built a relationship with teenagers that he mentors, and he has to grapple with how close is too close with students like that. When you're working with students who come from hard backgrounds, sometimes that line can be so easily crossed, right? And so he's trying to grapple with, yes, I need to be there for my students because not only does it help them, it helps me, but I have to make sure that I take care of myself. And then you have the bread and butter, so to speak, between Shane and Eva, who are, I'll be quite honest, deeply flawed, right? When they met, they were not sober for much of it, and so I know that obviously colors their initial attraction, right? Their initial relationship. And then once they reconnect, Shane is sober, but Eva is working through this disability that kind of influences the way that she shows up for other people and the way that she is even able to show up for herself. So when I think about this book, I think about deeply, deeply compelling characters. I think about a story that is fresh and fun and funny. There are a lot of pop culture references that some older folks might not understand and some younger folks might not understand. But they do give a look at what it means to be 30-something. And it also kind of focuses on, in the background, there's this conversation about what it means to be a Black writer, what it means to be, especially, and not just what it means to be a Black writer, but the different types of writer, because you've got Eva who writes these erotic novels, and so in some circles she's not considered a real writer, she writes fluff. And then you've got Shane, who is this, I guess, powerhouse, but most of his work is kind of written from a female perspective, and so that we see those conversations, like who gets to write the stories, whose stories gets applauded, and so when I think about this book, I had such a fun time reading it, and so I recommend it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I will say that it might not be for everybody. Like I said, there is mentions of drug use, there's mentions of suicide, there is mentions of sexual assault, and so be prepared for those. But I think they are what makes this story real, because those things are a part of our stories, and maybe not all of ours, but it is a part of our stories, and it is something that we can understand. And what I love about it is that it reminds us that these are things that we can work through, right? Like, we do not have to be defined by some of these horrific things that happen. So I know that was kind of long-winded. Thank you for joining me for my first Black Girl Magic book chat. I will see you all next Thursday, where I will be reading or talking about The Secret Lives of Church Ladies. I can't wait. See you then.